Hello. So continuing this idea of doubling up your revision, because hands up, who wants to do more work than they need to? And without even being able to look through the camera, I can tell there are no hands up. Because why would you? Why would you want to do extra revision? So, basically, I'm offering this idea of you can double up your revision if you do things sensibly. So, I'm going to go with costume as an idea for today, and I'm going to talk about what it is you should be doing in section A and section B and how they translate. So, moving forward, first of all, go back to when I talked about in the lighting video. If you haven't seen it, take a little look. I would like you to go think about this idea of, and I'm just recycling this, okay? This idea of basically the skills of GCSE drama paper boil down to three main things. And this is exactly the same with the costume as well. So, in terms of being able to identify your weaknesses, because remember, if you're not making mistakes, you aren't doing it right. And being able to, if you think of the specific categories, think, can I, in all of these areas, identify? Can I also talk about what they might show? And can I talk about the success levels, i.e. evaluation? So that's what we're going to stick to as our formula, as our routine, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. So let's start off with the identify section. Okay, so first of all, costume is one of those areas where when you're given a question on it, people feel a little bit hit and miss, and I keep thinking I would love to make some sort of fancy acronym to help people remember this, but I'm going to leave that to you. And if you do come up with an acronym from some of the criteria that I go with through you today, then let me know. I would love to use it on future videos and for future students and for yourselves too. So we're going to start off, because I don't want it to be boring and bland and me just chatting too much. I'm going to start off to help remind you a little bit about what features of costume are. We're going to do, it's going to be a bit of a one-way sort of thing, but a bit of a game of Pictionary / charades, okay? Well, not charades really, because you can't see me so much, but in terms of me giving you sort of responses and then you eventually hopefully working out the answers. So, the round is obviously about costume, and they are descriptions of main criteria that you would use in terms of how you would break down costume as an element, so that when you're given a question in section A or section B, you know what things you've got to tick off your list to talk about and discuss, and it will help you be super confident in your exam. So, okay, so for criteria number one, okay, I'm going to draw this. Okay, so this could go badly, but I'm going to give you a few clues. It's somewhat seeming like a PlayStation sort of thing. Okay, hopefully now you've got it that these are all examples of. At this point I can hear maths teachers across the nation crying. Okay, so hopefully you got it from that clue. Our first key word when talking about costume is shape. Okay, so what shape it is on the actor, okay, or on the character that is going to wear it for section A. So you describe the shapes that it was making, the silhouette it formed, whether it was quite angular, whether it was quite soft on them, whether it sort of swamped them. So our first area is shape. Okay, so number two. Okay, so see if you can find the link between these. Hopefully you've found the link that they are all nice and simply colour. So the colours that were used, okay? So number 2 is colour. 3. Ooh. Okay, so this is kind of connected to shape, but it's more about how it's tailored, how it's formed on the body, and the specific way it has been, and I can't say the next word because it's giving it away, but the specific way it has been shaped on the body. Got it? Hopefully. Cut. Okay, so the way that the shape of the costume has been cut. Okay. 4. So, I'm going to do a verbal clue on this one. So, denim is an example. Hessian, maybe velvet, silk, wool, cotton. Hopefully you've got in your mind then the type of fabric or material it is. Okay, so the fabric or material. Okay, so number 5. So I'm going to do these as a verbal clue again. So these, okay, that's a slight clue already. These can be things like a hat, a necklace, maybe a handbag, maybe a belt. They're all examples of accessories. Okay, so we've got so far shape, colours, cut, fabric, accessories. 6. So 6, I'm going to do a bit of a visual clue. Again, no promises about my state of my drawing. Sorry, art teachers, didn't mean to upset with this. This is pretty bad. Okay, so so I'm gonna just say that's makeup. So if there is any, or if there is not, and why that has been made, but we'll come back more onto that. Okay, so 7 is something that, yes, it is still part of costume. Some of you have blonde, some of you have brunette. It's your hair. It's the hair of the character. Okay, so this is your little checklist of revision elements that you need to think about when you get a costume related question. So this will help you be less hit and miss about what sort of things you could cover, because otherwise it turns into someone just talking about colours and colours and colours and colours, and it doesn't really reflect a really rounded answer. Okay, so this is something that could come up in section A or B. So for section B, it might be analyse and evaluate the use of costume in a production that you saw. But in section A, it might be insert name of character here, or it might be choose a character from the play that you have studied and tell us how costume would create meaning to an audience. Okay, so this is where you guys need to take over a little bit, and this is where I suggest that we're going to work with section A first. Okay, I want you to pick 3 characters, and it would be worth doing 3 characters to see whether or not you can actually test yourself. Okay, so if you put all your eggs in one basket, you might have a question with another character come up and you'll be really kicking yourself. So I would pick 3 different characters, okay, and I would do a drawing, or I would list down what sort of things using this criteria of these 7 words and see how much detail you can come up with. Okay, so I would stop the video there if I were you, and I would do your drawing or make your list, because remember, in section A you if you get a question like this, you might be given the space to write and you might be given the space to draw. Okay, so don't worry about the state of your drawings. I'm not great, evidence A, and just give it a shot. Okay, so hopefully you're back by now. Now, one thing that is really clear and what I need to make really explicit to you is in the exam it will say something like there will be no marks for the quality of your drawing. Okay, so if you do some sort of fabulously detailed and it's covering all of these, right, but you don't describe what it is you've done, you don't use the words, you get a big fat 0. Okay, so what you need to do is make sure that you also describe how you are using these areas. So, okay, I'm going to do an improvisation here of off the top of my head for section A. So for section A, say I'd been given the opportunity to create a costume for the rat catcher. Okay, so my first point I would make would be generally I want the shape of the costume to be like quite angular, quite sharp, to reflect this jagged personality and this dangerous personality, and I want it to be quite billowing in terms of its shape and its form. That means it makes him look like a shadow. Okay, so if you can't see what I'm doing here, I'm also sort of treading on the toes now of analyse and explain, aka what I said in the doubling up format earlier in terms of talking about can I identify and can I say how and then get to why. Okay, so I said about the shape, connoting this angular personality and looking like this shadow. Okay, colours wise, I want real dark blacks and greys and browns. Number one, to help him blend into the shadows and also to look like the sort of rat that he is sort of tasked with trying to get. That's the character's agenda, and possibly to show this character's dark personality and to be hidden and just all in all be quite horrific. Okay, the cut of the costume. Okay, so the cut of the costume I would like, as I've mentioned before, to be quite angular, quite sharp, but be quite baggy over the character so that it creates this sort of billowing effect. Fabric, I'd like it to be a heavy, dark, sort of Hessian material. So a dark black Hessian material which is quite heavy looking and quite draping, and it reflects the idea of the depression that Eva/Evelyn is suffering as a result of looking back to her past, and also this fear she feels. Okay, I want it to be quite oppressive and a heavy sort of fabric. Okay, accessories, I don't know if you'd quite class these as accessories, but I would like sort of rat's tails, sort of almost dripping from the cloak that he has, as almost like these reminders of the many souls he has taken, which some people believe that the rat catcher is a symbol of someone who is set to take the Jews and to capture them, etc., which Eva is. I would also quite like him to have some sort of, potentially like a top hat, just because it's just quite horrific and dark and sharp and nasty, and it shows like he can hide himself quite quickly. Makeup, I'd quite like him, I think I'd quite like a pale sort ofness to him, so I'd probably have like a white foundation over him, like a white clown white makeup, and maybe some sharp angled sort of chiselling in his face to be indicated, and smudges. probably just to show that he is this soulless individual, and has no warmth amongst him. And his hair, I want it to be tied back. I want it to be longer, so it almost has him having like a long ponytail as well, and would want it to be tied up because it's like he's being a professional, he's doing a job, and again going with this idea of being soulless. So that is my idea of how I would define and describe a costume. And hopefully, if this was an 8-marker question, because I've covered all those points and explained them nicely and talked about what they display and denote and imply and focus and suggest. This is a good little list, by the way, if you wanted to screenshot it and write down some of these things just to help you with some sentence starters. And that would help you with section A. Now, section B. Okay, so again, we're going to come back to this list, so it's maybe worth keeping that there. But also, I want to have a little look at these criteria again, because I'm going to just go onto Google, and I've typed in if you need this as a revision resource, I've typed in the production that we went to see, and there are some really helpful screenshots if you have completely forgotten. It has been a long time. I'm going to focus in on, and I'm going to assume that I'm going to just go with one character at the moment, but if you were given something as specific as analyse costume in a production you saw, can I stress that you would need to do more than one costume, okay? So I'm going to do just an example. I'm going to use, I think I'm going to go with Antigone, okay? So I'm going to go through the criteria that I've set with our thing earlier, and then I'm going to go through for section B sort of things I might say. Okay, so the actress playing Antigone, first of all, had a shaped costume which I believe was generally to try and represent restriction. In the sense that it was shaped because it was cinched at the waist, in terms of like around her sort of waist area, and to show that restriction she felt there and that claustrophobia almost of the environment she was in, because she was very much restricted by the laws of the gods and by the laws of her uncle. Okay, so I would mention that as a certain thing. I would also say that potentially it was quite a tight, generally quite tight costume, but very sort of sharp and military in form, in the sense of there was, and this is going down really into colours, it was very much as a theme, it had quite military colours, sort of khaki greens, khaki browns, this potentially denoting that she was in some form of war with her family, and this war and this wanting to go undetected. That's all the connotations of this army sort of picture and army sort of colour scheme that was going in here. Okay, so denote implies echoes, etc. She had this sort of button-up form as well, which meant that she was professional, she meant business, etc, etc. In terms of cut, kind of covered that in terms of the shapes, but it was also very quite tailored, quite regimented, etc, etc. Fabrics, it's hard to tell, but the best guess is that it was a form of corduroy trouser, which is quite smart, official, and sort of not what you would use for casual wear at all. And the fabric of the shirt was cotton, but it wasn't a light cotton. It was quite starchy in that how it moved. It was quite stiff, again implying that she was here to do a job and get that task done. In terms of accessories, the biggest accessory was her waist belt, which cinched her in, and this again echoed this sort of feeling of restriction and this idea of the patriarchal system that she was leading, she was are very much amongst. And that was her main accessory, really, unless you class the veil that she wore later on, at the point where she becomes this sort of toxic bride of death, and the sort of form of that and how that takes, and it's billowing, it's complete juxtaposition to how she is for the majority of the play, which seals her fate, really. And in terms of makeup, there was no specific real makeup scheme as such, which meant that she was kind of almost genderless, in this context anyway, because she sort of rejected feminism in the sense of feeling the inferior race, which was part of the aims of the production, I believe. She sort of rejected this idea of femininity, and again, that's linking back to the cut actually, and the shapes. It sort of tried to deny that sense of femininity as though it was a flaw, and as though that would make her less of a leader. And that echoes really in the attitude of Creon, which he was up against. Okay, so there was no makeup, and you know, to make her completely equal to others. Her hair was neat, tidy, back in a bun. Again, sort of trying to show, I believe, that gender was not an issue, and I mean the whole production did take quite a fluid look on gender, even though they made a point of showing the patriarchal system. But thinking about it in terms of Tiresias is generally played by a male, but was played by a female at this point, so it was trying to prove that gender doesn't matter as such as well. Okay, so that would be how I would discuss and analyse the use of that actress's costume within this production. So really it lies with, can you now do the same with other characters? Can you say what it implies and shows and focuses on? And then also, and this is where I'm going to leave you to do some work on your own, can you use what I've put here in terms of some evaluation starter sentences? Can you make a conclusion about whether these costume choices were successful? If I were you, I'd put this either in a list, or you could put it in a mind map. That is a useful strategy for exam revision. Or just talk it out loud, tell the dog, tell the cat, tell whoever, and have that argument with people. Can you argue whether or not it was successful and what would have made it more successful? Make the revision count, not by osmosis, but by doing something with it, and that way you will succeed. I would love to hear from you in terms of ideas that you have, or if you disagree with something that I say. But really, I'm going to hand over to you now. Hope that's been helpful. Bye bye.